I'm hiding behind Seb James. I'm over here.
We're live in the studio. We've got Roland over here, so you're not going to be able to see him, but he will be there. So if you hear the voice, that's his voice.
Yeah, you'll just randomly hear me come in at some point.
As long as you're not like pulling faces while I can't see. Important there. And I'll hear that, Roland, just so you know.
I'm sure you'll catch up with it.
Yeah. James, thank you so much for joining us. This is our first ever episode. We've just had on Philip, the founder of Zilch. We've had Denai, the founder of Gradient Labs. You're our third guest. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, James.
We launched this as it happened in London Tech Week. We were talking to Philip about it. Would love to get your views. Like, what have you been up to? Who have you been speaking to? What's the kind of vibe or atmosphere at the moment?
Yeah, it's a bit like Eurovision for tech and venture people, isn't it? There's a lot going on. It's very international. A combination of serious and drinks everywhere. So it's great. There's a lot of really positive movement, both from a sort of an ecosystem level and also a policy level. So, I was over at Checkers on Sunday, helped one of the self-driving cars get their wave, which we parked on the lawn of Checkers in this amazing future of Britain, past of Britain kind of vision. Prime Minister was there, the Chancellor was there, but also, Jensen Huang flew in for that meeting. Brian Schiff, one of the founders of Anduril, flew in for the meeting. We had really senior people from Google, Microsoft and other governments. And so the ability of the UK to convene and bring all those people together is exceptional still, right? That is world leading. There are only 3 or 4 nations in the world that can do that kind of thing. So it's great that we're still able to do it and get exposure and engagement from that level of sort of founders as well as institutions. And then there's a lot of positive policy announcements, some of which has come out already. The sort of movement on self-driving vehicles being one of them, expansion of visas, increased public support for tech and adoption, and more to come. So all of that creates a great baseline, but obviously, a lot of it's headlines and promises, and we need to see some delivery. So that's what comes in the hard weeks following London Tech Week. I'm about to go off to Founders Forum, actually. So that's up in Soho Farmhouse. So that's my next stop.
Yeah, amazing. How bullish are you on the next stage, on the execution? They're not just the headlines and the, bringing, the big guests out. Do you think this is going to spark change?
Yeah, I'm incredibly bullish. Right? I'm long early stage technology entrepreneurs. That's my job. And venture is an amazing asset class where, you get to make 2 decisions, when to invest and when to exit. And in the middle, you're just there trying to help people grow. And to do that kind of job, you really have to be bullish. So I'm naturally optimistic. I'm naturally bullish. And I'm really strongly optimistic about European founders. I think one of the things that the general conversation that's going on at the moment in the press and everything about the UK, is it a good place or bad place? That's actually a secondary question for me. The biggest thing is, can great founders build global winners starting off in Europe? And the answer is definitely yes. And obvious, right? We've got loads of data around that. The secondary question is, what benefit is that to the UK if they have to move early, if they can't list here, if they can't raise money here, if regulations prevent them from growing? That's a secondary question. And I still have lots of question marks and challenges there. In terms of, do we have a phenomenal base of entrepreneurs and founders and companies which are going to create global category leaders wherever they end up in the world? That's an obvious yes. And I think we've got plenty of evidence to suggest that. And I'm only more confident on that point.
Yeah. And what are you seeing in your portfolio founders? Are you seeing them, are they making the move to the US? Are they seeing it just as a big market to tap into? Are they seeing it as their future home?
Look, it's always been our aspiration to back people who think globally anyway, right? We invest in Europe. In the earliest stages of a company, we want to be in the office, on the doorstep, going for lunch, meeting with the founders all the time, because I think that relationship's really important. But if you speak to sort of Alex Kendall from Wave or Nikolai at Revolut, or, we used to have the CEO of Darktrace, who's now the Minister for Investment of Britain, but Poppy, they're British, they're building British companies, they consider themselves to have big teams here, but they're global anyway, right? May from Writer, yes, her family's here in London. She lives on a plane, right? And the reality is, to build in many categories, to build like a global champion, you have to think globally from day one anyway. So anyone who's like, I want to build the British winner and I'm going to stay in Britain, it's probably the wrong attitude. Maybe not in just one area of fintech or one area of life sciences, but it's probably the wrong attitude anyway. And I think there's this weird thing where often we get a bit of like national pettyism trumping global ambition. I want to see global ambition. It's good for Britain. It's good for everyone. And saying like, oh, is this person British? Are they staying in Britain? Are they building their team here? Or is this person French? Are they staying in France? Are they building their team here? Sort of misses the bigger picture, which is if you want to build a big business from anywhere, it's global from day one.
Yeah. And so to push you on that, do you think it matters? Companies like Oxford Ionics being acquired by a US company, Deliveroo being taken private, Wise moving. Does it matter that they end up in the US? Do you see like negative implications for the UK tech ecosystem when we lose our scale ups to the US?
Yeah, so look, I've been investing for like 15 years in venture, and that's actually not a long time in venture, but hundreds of investments and term sheets and companies grown and exited and sold and failed. And the narrative's gone like this. In 2010, Europe has no tech companies. In 2015, we've got loads of tech companies, but got no money. In 2020, we've got loads of tech companies and they've got loads of money, but they're not worth the valuations and they'll never exit. 2025, you're like companies raising billions of dollars, companies selling billions of dollars in secondary, companies listing for billions of dollars, companies exiting in M&A for billions of dollars. And the narrative is, oh, this is bad. Why aren't you building $100 billion companies? And in 2030, when we have 3 or 4 $100 billion software businesses, they're going to say, why don't you have $1 trillion companies, right? I mean, this is part of building an ecosystem. You can't do it overnight. It needs capital, talent, recycling that capital, proof points to later stage investors and more risk-averse investors that this can work. This is a 30-year build process we're in around the software community in Europe, where, let's be honest, the Silicon Valley had a head start for many good reasons and sort of historical reasons. And to some extent, in some areas we're playing catch up. In some areas we're way ahead. But anyone who's like another $1 billion exit is a failure for Britain. Trust me, 10 years ago, oh my God, we would have been praying for $1 billion exits. So it's great to see. I welcome it.
And do you think it's a bit of like the British mindset that we sort of we're a bit overly negative, pessimistic, that we kind of bring ourselves down a bit? Because I think you're right. European and UK venture has taken off. We are building some of the leading companies in the world. And when you talk about the 100 billion businesses, I completely agree. I think like Revolut is way up there, almost certainly going to be one of the next $100 billion companies in the world. So yeah, do you think it's us and the mindset that we are inherently negative compared to like our American counterparts?
Yeah, no, so not at all. I actually kind of get offended when people say it, because there are countless examples of brilliant Brits, Irish, French, German, Swedish founders building like $100 billion, even $1 trillion businesses. Look at the CEOs and founders of some of the most successful software companies in the world over the last 20 years, right? They come from everywhere. Right? If you look at the unicorn founders list in America, half of those people were not born in America, right? So to say British entrepreneurs aren't ambitious is incredibly insulting. It's wrong, like factually wrong, and also insulting. The real question is, can you build a big British winner where a lot of your engineers, marketers, salespeople, and customers are based in the UK? Certainly not customers, right? You have to have global customer base. Certainly not talent. You want to have global talent. You want to have the best people from everywhere. But can you build a business where you predominantly reside in the UK and grow? And that is a harder question, because there is a tax on people staying in Britain on ambition. I don't mean like there is a monetary tax for sure, but I mean tax in its broader sense. There's a cost to it, right? Some of that is cultural for sure. Some of that is regulatory. Some of that is actual monetary punishments for scaling a company in the UK, like the limits on the EMI scheme, stamp duty on shares. Like these are taxes on people building successful companies, which grow as you scale. So there are some hard restraints on building businesses here in Britain. There is zero, in my view, lack of ambition, grind, hustle, or talent amongst the British population or people who've come to Britain to build. That is not a problem. And I worry that often we get those two things a little bit confused.
On that, I'd love to just jump in there. It may be perfect timing. James, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the current 996 debate that was brought up by Harry Stebbings on Twitter the other day. And we've also seen Saranga made some comments that were featured in Fortune. Do you have a take? Do you have any thoughts?
I have lots of thoughts. So look, I think the 996 article was Martin Mignot initially making the point around sort of working hours in different cultures in America and China in particular. And then I think Harry Stebbings said you have to work 7 days a week. And, Harry's content creator, and I get I get why sometimes he'll say things purposely provocatively. Our view as a fund has always been that the best founders I've worked with, I think they're much more like athletes, and we think of them more like athletes here at Balderton. And Usain Bolt doesn't run a PB every time he goes out to sprint his 100 meters, right? The best athletes in the world, I don't think. I mean, Serena Williams would have played a lot of tennis, but I don't think she plays every single game until exhaustion, and she doesn't play 24/7, 7 days a week. I think there's like an element of balance that you need. And you need it for yourself. And that's a mental balance. It's a physical balance, right? You need time to work out. You need time to rest. You need time with your family and friends, right? It's just like this idea that you're working 24/7 is completely wrong. And it's also not a fair representation of what happens in China and America either. And also, like, you will not get great talent if you say to them, we are only here to work. Look, the conversions officers worked incredibly hard. It was like insane the hours you were working. But it wasn't just like you must be in the office at 7 a.m. and you can't leave till 9 p.m., right? People traveled, people were fluid on their working hours. Some people are night owls and work late into the night, start later in the morning, vice versa. Some people have responsibilities with kids, some people have responsibilities with family. And I think it's hard because, when you say something online, it's hard to have nuance. But I do worry that the simplification of, you don't work hard enough if you're not in the office every single day of the week is factually wrong. And I worry that it doesn't bring out the best in founders and teams in the long run. And so we have something called the Well-Founded program here at Balderton, which is directed at our founders, but we're trying to expand it to more employees in our portfolio companies to make sure when they need it, they can get, health advice and get mental health advice. They can get nutritional support, because we want them to perform like when they're at the World Cup final, not like every single day under the stress of saying this is like the most important thing you'll do this minute, because that doesn't result, in my view, in brilliant long run sustainable companies.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it comes down to trust as well, really. It's like flexibility and trust. So you mentioned convergence. I think that's what the team installed in us pretty early on. It was just do what you need to do to get the work done and do it however you need to do it.
And the bar was so high and the expectations were so high and you all worked really hard. But that doesn't mean you must follow what a board member says about you must be in the office, 7 days a week. I mean, if I said that as a board member, I'd expect most of the founders to tell me to get lost, rightly so.
Yeah, do you think that has an implication or an effect on Harry's portfolio founders, if that's what he's expecting?
No. Once again, Harry's a content creator, right? So I wouldn't, I think he wants to create a debate, right? So good for him. And I agree with that. It's good, as we're discussing here, it's a good topic to try and bring nuance out of. I think that what I would hate is for people to read, I know Martin Mignot really well as well. I know, he sort of intended to raise some of these cultural differences. It wasn't like a comment about people not working hard, because obviously they do. And I'm from a family where everyone was like self-employed. People work really, really hard, right? Like this isn't unique to tech founders that people work all the time. I think that the truth though is, and what I'd hate is for this kind of discussion online in small snippets to be read into too much and put people off applying for roles because they're worried that, be in the office 7 days a week, work 996, whatever it is, means you don't have flexibility for other responsibilities you have in your life, like working out, like eating properly, like sleeping properly, like looking after kids or, other dependents. If you signal too much to those people that you can't do that, because it's not true. I'm sure it's not true in any of Index's portfolio, our portfolio, 20VC's portfolio. I'm sure that's not the case. But if you signal that it might be the case, you may lose out on some great people, and that's the worst outcome possible for a tech company. Talent is everything.
One of the other things we wanted to touch on was like the overall state of European venture from somebody who's living and breathing it every day. We know Balderton raised 2 massive rounds last year, over $1 billion. We also saw your recent investment, I think, in Quantum Systems. That's like are they primarily defense?
It's dual use, but they have significant defense contracts.
Is this a deal that you think Balderton would have done 5 years ago, or has Ukraine just changed the field entirely?
Yeah, so we invest. We've got 3 different routes to investment. One is sort of deep thesis, like first principles investing, and we announced an investment in Proxima Fusion today in the fusion space. And similarly, we've done investments along that line. We invest in reaction to changing technologies we hadn't seen. So like breakthroughs in Gen AI. We didn't have a thesis on Gen AI before Transformers models and before GPT-3. Obviously quickly we had to build one. And sometimes we invest because of brilliant founders. The reality with an investment like Quantum Systems is the business provides IRS, intelligence, reconnaissance, surveillance drones, right? So they can be used to monitor, let's say, an oil rig, or monitor like a high security delivery or something like that. But also they are obviously used right now a lot in a live combat situation in Ukraine to monitor enemy and allied assets moving around, people moving around, everything else. And they use that information to direct decisions, which through its battle management system, which military commanders will make. So obviously there's a heavy defense angle. And in that case, we're responding to something that's changed over the last 2 years, which is a thesis we've had for about 2 years, but we wouldn't have had it 5 years ago. We're responding to it. And that thesis is that defense expenditure is going to rise significantly, that there's a new way of doing warfare, and drones and unmanned vehicles will be, and as the British sort of recent strategic defense review said, will be the biggest area of change and probably the biggest area of investment for war going forward. I mean, there's this, I think it was Demis at DeepMind saying, look, there's this future where warfare, you've got to imagine the future warfare being 1 million drones versus 1 million drones. And it's a thought exercise, but, directionally, there's a reality to that. And so we responded to that by looking at what kind of companies in Europe and what kinds of teams in Europe can deliver on that promise. And we found, the Quantum Systems team have been at it for a long time. They're experienced military professionals who have built resilient supply chains, but also building software on top. They ticked a lot of the boxes. The nice thing about being a multi-stage firm like we are now, so we raised $1.3 billion last year for an early and growth strategy, is you can look at all different types of companies. And ultimately we led a big growth round for Quantum Systems. How do we met them 5 years ago? I met them first 2 years ago, to be fair. And I really love the founders, but how we met them 5 years ago, I think the reality is we wouldn't have done it. We wouldn't have done it because we wouldn't have had conviction that the spending on the defense side would get there. But now we have high conviction in that, and I have a strong belief in that company actually.
Yeah, they look really cool. I saw you talk about it. I think you were like in the field with them, trying out some of their tech, weren't you?
Yeah. And do you know what they use when the drones aren't? This isn't this is public information, so I'm not belying anything. But when the drones aren't in autonomous flight mode, they're controlled with Xbox controllers. And this is like one of the learnings of being in the field in Ukraine is like, what can everyone use? Every single person knows how to use an Xbox controller. So you don't need some sophisticated device. It's like, 40 euros and you've got an Xbox controller that can control these phenomenal intelligence drones.
Well, that's amazing. I never would have, yeah.
Well, I'd seen some of the professional, like drone flying has been like a sport before.
Yeah.
I've seen some of the professional drone flyers have sort of gone back to the front lines and worked with some of the engineers there. And I think, I can't remember the name of the company, we'll have to look it up, but one went on to sort of raise some cash and start building drones. Yeah. And like his background was he was a professional drone flyer.
Yeah, and like first person goggles. I've seen companies doing first person goggles for drones. But the speed, the takeaway from what we're seeing in defense is, well, so one, we try and do dual use, right? So we hope there's peace. Obviously, we want to live in a peaceful world, and Quantum Systems provides solutions for a peaceful world as well as ones which can be used for defense. So that's, has to be part of our thesis. But the speed of iteration is just rapid, right? The Russian forces have started flying drones on fiber optic cables, which are kilometers long. And they're tiny. It looks like, you look at these fields in Ukraine and they look like they're covered in spider webs because there's so many of these assets being flown, as a response to jamming techniques. And now Ukraine has drones and individuals who cut those fiber optic cables so that the line no longer works. This is happening in a matter of weeks, these iterations. And the procurement cycles, innovation cycles in defense historically have been years, right? So as a result, it's actually a more interesting place to invest as a VC and a better place for an entrepreneur to operate because of these iteration cycles. But look, it's complicated and it's hard. So we're excited about Quantum Systems, but it wouldn't have happened maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah. And 1 minute left, just to wrap up. what are the 2 or 3 most exciting companies in Balderton's portfolio that like you are really excited about that we should be looking at?
I don't have favorites. I'm afraid. Every investment we make, we genuinely believe, and we write in a memo and argue about how this business becomes a $10 billion success story. We've recently announced investments in fields as far as space logistics, as generative AI applications, and now nuclear fusion. So, look, if you're interested in a broad and bullish portfolio, you can look at all of Balderson's companies.
Very political.
You're asking a parent who's his favorite kid.
Yeah. Well, James, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great to have you. But yeah, we'll keep in touch, and anytime you want to announce future rounds, future funding, to come.
Yeah.
Sure. It's great you're doing this, guys. We desperately need sort of more, I think, reactive and thoughtful media when it comes to the tech industry. So I look forward to listening in.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks, James.
Cheers, James. Bye-bye.